Well, we're on, Teresa.
Well, good morning, Cynthia.
This is new for us to be early.
Yes, indeed.
In line.
So welcome a few minutes early. I love it when the tech works. All right, so let's just get our conversation started a few minutes early. We welcome anyone who's joining us here on LinkedIn. I'm Teresa Agresta, and as you likely know, this is my business partner, Cynthia Forstman at CultureTalk. And we're excited today because we are starting a new topic and what we call critical paths here at CultureTalk. We have been focused this year on two critical paths. So far, we've covered the idea of brand and brand development and personal brand. We've done a trek through the idea of transformation, organizational change, culture shift. And this month in May and through the month of June, we're going to take a deep dive into a third critical path here at CultureTalk, and that is leadership development. This is a juicy, meaty topic and one that we really feel is foundational to the conversation around organizational culture. One of the things that is part of a tenet of our belief system here is this idea that individuals and organizations are inextricably intertwined, and that you cannot have a healthy impact on organizational culture, whether you're trying to shift it, change it, grow it, if you ignore the leaders and the individuals that are the driving force in that culture. So we need to have a healthy way to look at and understand and then help to grow in a positive way the leaders that are part of our team. And all the individuals need to grow in their leadership skills. All those things that we have heard in these past few years have grown in importance: the ability to communicate effectively, to share ideas, to collaborate, to be able to recognize how to improve those skills. All of those soft skills that we hear about really can be brought together under this topic of leadership development, whether we're looking at people who are already in a leadership role or those emerging leaders, the people that we are growing on our teams. So that's our topic for this morning. And of course, as usual, we have some distinct ideas about how archetype and understanding your own profile can be super instructive in that conversation.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge as we get going too, that there are a lot of awesome leadership development programs and frameworks. And so what we want to do today is sort of differentiate what's different about using the Archetype storytelling framework that's part of the CultureTalk system. And also, it's sort of a yes and, because you could be using the Archetype storytelling work alongside and integrating it with other tools or things that you already have going to develop leaders and teams. So lots of great leadership development work. One of our funnest, is that a word? Funnest? I always find most fun.
Most fun, yeah.
Yeah, most fun topics. And so let me start by describing, Teresa, what, at CultureTalk, as you alluded, we have, this idea that the organization and the individuals are together. We need to think about them both. And we have two assessment tools to look at archetype patterns that exist in organizations and in individuals.
Right.
To get into the leadership development conversation, we're really focused on that individual assessment and measuring an individual's archetype pattern. So that's the first step that we undertake when we teach this work, is to take a CultureTalk for Individuals assessment. So we're going to measure the patterns that you already, the storylines that are already active in your life experience, both personally and professionally.
Right. And very aptly, we often do this and we encourage this, but Cynthia and I have both shared on our name today, the storylines that inform each of us. So you'll notice as co-founders and business owners, we have some things that are in common and some other ways in which our patterns are different and in very much supportive of one another and complementary. And so just a little peek into one use case for understanding how do you show up and how do you articulate, into your strengths, and also what might some of those, holes in the road be for you that you find over and over again in your own leadership journey.
Yeah.
So you see a little clue there as to how we use that information to help communicate. And as a good reminder of, where can we lean into this individual? How can this leader bring their best and their most value and their greatest impact to a team?
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's a great test of archetype, because if you just read the names of some of the archetypes we have listed next to our names, archetypes, because they're human storylines, like we already know these stories as human beings. We don't have to be, people scientists to look at the word lover, ruler, magician, creator, lover, caregiver, and to already make some really good guesses. There's that like shortcut to understanding like, ooh, I know how ruler behaves or caregiver behaves, right? So that's one of the reasons it's really impactful. The other thing to know when you measure archetypes, because the second step in a culture talk process is to validate the storylines. We never want someone to take an assessment and go, oh, I feel like, I'm in a box, because we're this very unique.
Or I've been labeled, right?
Right. Rather, what we really want to invite people to do, your leaders, if you're measuring archetypes, is to emerge through this really unique profile of how do their archetypes come together. And so the second step we take is actually to have people validate. So if we measured a high creator archetype, for example, in my profile, like what are the ways that a creator archetype shows up for me? What do people count on me for? What am I known for? What are the strengths of those patterns? We can also in the storylines find motivation. What do I notice? What do I believe about myself? What do I believe is important? And as you alluded to, kind of the bumps in the road, what are the shadows? Because these are human stories. They're not perfect. And we are each a unique combination of archetypes.
Right. I often like to think about that unique profile. For instance, the three that are coming together under my name or under Cynthia's name, like a thumbprint. Like all of us have a very unique identity through our thumbprint, the way these patterns come together show up in a nuanced, real, live human being, not somebody that's been typed or put into a stereotype or a box. And that takes a lot of leadership right there to recognize that this is a real human being in front of me. And if I want to get the best out of this person for our organization, for my team, then I need to understand the things that Cynthia just laid out. So I need to understand how to motivate this person, what the assignments and projects that they're going to shine in and be excited about and sort of really be drawn to, as well as when I'm needing something from them that is going to be a little harder. So things that we know they're going to struggle with, where might they need extra support and that leadership. So awareness, right? We sort of advertise this conversation today as a look at self-awareness. So knowing those things about myself. And then by extension, if you are leading clients, for instance, through a team building, a leadership development program, if you are leading a team, like you are responsible for the growth and development of a team, how can you apply that kind of thinking once the original and initial self-awareness is generated?
Yeah.
And obviously, always, how do I tap into what I know to be true for myself?
right? We see when a leadership team, for example, goes through an experience with archetypes, that in the moment that they are emerging, they're validating their own patterns and they're going, I see myself. This is how I see myself in these storylines. It's unique thumbprint. Even if, two leaders have a high creator or high lover or whatever, their stories are different and their storylines are different. So now they're showing up wholly and uniquely as themselves. And once they see themselves in those patterns, wow, it's in the moment, they go, this is me. But I think the deeper work happens after they leave that initial experience and they start to recognize, oh, I'm doing that creator thing again, or that ruler thing again. They start, even that self-awareness, they'll start to see when they are operating from the strength of a pattern and where it is an empowered version of the archetype versus when they've slipped into what we think of as the shadow of that pattern. And they'll start to call themselves out in a really quick, like we need these ways to recover, right? Sometimes we're never
going to love that. Yeah. The ability to recover.
Yeah. So the self-awareness builds over time. And the really fun part about working with archetypes is that foundational self-awareness is just the beginning, because once we know our storylines, right, we can grow and evolve in many, many different ways. So I'll give an example, and then Teresa, maybe you can share one. Let's say I have a particular archetypal profile right now that has been measured and validated, but maybe there's another archetype pattern that's just below, right? That is something that I tap into sometimes, but not all of the time. I might identify for myself, for example, magician is my fourth pattern. And I might be looking at my career path or my leadership ability, and I might say, wow, I wonder what it would be like for me if I had a little bit more of the intuition and potential seeing magician as part of
the visionary, right? The one who says, I have an idea. It's big, but we can get there. We can do it. And it sort of paints that picture for other people.
Yeah. And so what would it be like? How would I develop that ability in myself? So just a real small taste, I could look at other patterns I have access to that maybe aren't as activated currently. And I can actually begin to develop a development path. I could create some strategies, some personal strategies for how would I become more visionary? How would I step in and lean into magician and raise that up in my profile?
Right.
So one example.
Right. We may sometimes think about those ideas from the perspective of a personal brand. For instance, that's another opportunity that a leader can take to lay out, like, how am I showing up and being perceived? And is that what's going to help me get to the next place? Is that brand that I've established, those expectations that people, kind of unconsciously understand from me and expect from me, are those the things that are going to support the growth and development of my team, my ability to emerge into the next level of leadership, or to provide the kind of support that the organization needs in order to get where it's going? So maybe, for instance, your choice to shift into a new pattern might support some opportunities that are in front of your team. Maybe your team needs a bigger vision set out for them to inspire them and to help move them into, a more of a results or a, results orientation for the team. So there might be some very specific business outcomes that are tied to your choice to develop that magician, and therefore growing the leaders on the team is really supportive of the business outcomes that, or, organizational outcomes that a group might be looking to achieve.
Absolutely. And now let me give a different example of how you can use archetypes to grow and evolve a leader. Inherently, we have certain patterns that are, easy for us. They're kind of our go-to habitual archetypes, right? And then we have other patterns that we would call latent, which doesn't mean we can't develop them. It just means that we haven't yet really leaned in and developed them. So for example, in my profile, I have my lowest latent pattern is revolutionary. So I probably am not at the front of the line breaking things down. People don't count on me to have like the totally controversial new opinion or idea. But when I start to become aware of my latent pattern, what I might also see is that where I'm latent, I have a little bit of unconscious bias around it. I might see somebody with, for example, a high revolutionary pattern, and even when they are totally operating in the strengths of that pattern, it may unconsciously rub me the wrong way because I don't know that pattern well. And so it's not part of sort of the lens that I look at the world through, that I look through at problems through, et cetera. And so understanding what patterns are latent in ourselves also provides a window into understanding, is there a pattern that I don't like, that I reject, that, people that have that pattern, I sort of don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. I often sort of visualize it as a like, whoa, stay over there, revolutionary. You frighten me. Maybe I don't recognize it. I might label it as something else, but subconsciously what's happening is like, I'm a little bit unnerved. I might be a little bit frightened because that's something that triggers me when I see that. And that might be part of, some other aspect of your story, but so true that understanding that really helps us to understand something about our own growth and where we might be able to become more effective by opening our ears and shifting our perception and that bias, right?
Including others that, have their own set of strengths that are not the same as ours, but beginning to see and appreciate perhaps. And I used revolutionary as an example because it's my latent pattern, but plenty of people who do archetypes have a really low caregiver, which is one of my top patterns. Mm-hmm. So, you might be, there are definitely people that are latent lovers, rulers, magicians, everything we have here. No, I'm not picking on revolutionary archetypes. We know plenty of people who use that pattern in amazing ways as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I think that's another important point around leadership is we need all of these types in our organizations. And sometimes the very things that we need as an organization, maybe it is radical change. Yeah. We are not open to hearing that message when that pattern shows up. So if you can use a system and a framework to identify, well, here comes the very thing that we asked for, as opposed to sometimes what I call like shooting the messenger. So being able to recognize the patterns and understand the gift that they bring expands your own leadership so that when you're looking at a team of people, and you may be unconsciously triggered by somebody's reactions to things, you can pause instead and understand what's the gift here. Is this something I need to step in and address in a teammate or on a team in a way that's constructive because maybe that pattern is in shadow? Or is this really something that is just triggering, but is bringing a gift and a message that would benefit all of us if we could reduce our reactivity and open our ears a little bit wider to take in different perspectives. Yeah. So,
yeah. Well, and so here's the benefit of archetype and storyline. There's just this multiplicity of ideas that you can lean into when it comes to growth and development.
Right.
And we've talked about latent bias. We've talked about developing underutilized, perhaps, storylines. We've talked about in the moment, how can I bring myself in check? Am I stepping into shadow? Where can I lean into a more empowered version of my archetype? We actually, in our partner community at CultureTalk, have a number of people that are developing entire ongoing workshop experiences for leaders where they continue to layer on another way to use archetypes. You've done that foundational piece of who am I as a leader? What is my profile as a leader? What are the strengths of that? But now, how do I network? How do I communicate? How do I shift and change? How do I hire and onboard and engage through this idea of understanding who I am and who the other people on the team are?
Yeah. Who's on the team, right? Who's on the bus? Another great application is pulling together a group that has diversity in terms of how they think and the strengths that they bring from an archetype perspective. So we see people that are pulling together work teams, project teams that are evaluating what are the strengths that each of these people bring and how do we get to take best advantage of these this unique mix of human beings that are coming together around a project. We know that, say a project team is coming together for a collaboration, an innovation, or they are working, in a project-based world where they're going to be together for some period of time, and then they're going to break up and join a new project team. So much of our work today happens in that fashion. And when we bring these people together, it takes a certain amount of time for them to feel each other out, learn how to gel, stop reacting with their unconscious biases, and actually listen and lean in to the strengths of the people around them. So it would take some time to become well-oiled and move past some of those initial bumps. And, that's where a lot of things we waste some time. And it's just kind of normal. It's kind of human. But having an understanding of who each person is, and through their archetype profile, understanding where their strengths lie, where their challenges lie, and how to motivate them is a huge advantage. So when we lean into developing people through this lens and giving them this tool, then pulling together unique working groups and teams of people can be a much more satisfying. You can land a lot quicker. I love what you said about, I forget how you phrased it just a minute ago, like, what's that? Recovering when you feel like you've made a faux pas in a group or you've had a failure on a team. Your ability to, sort of get back up and, emotionally recover is critical. And I think it's a great observation that understanding people's profiles gives them grace and it gives them a chance to do that kind of recovery as a leader. If you understand that process and you understand their drivers and their motivators, even how to support them for a quick recovery, how much more effective will you be in driving toward the outcomes that you're trying to create, both on the team and in the project at the end of the day?
Yeah, that is a new way of saying that. And I like it. I also like the grace. One of the beauties of archetypes is the recognition that we're not perfect. And when people begin to appreciate, say, my unique leadership style, they also give me grace to be that and be who I am in a really authentic way. So really powerful work opportunity when you bring archetypes into the conversation.
Yeah. I would like to just make an observation, Cynthia. We get the question a lot about, is there a preferred pattern that makes someone a better leader? Mm-hmm. And I think even the question itself, while it's quite natural and it comes up a lot, is a little bit of a trap. Mm. Our expectation that in order to be a good leader, that I should have certain traits and should lean into a particular pattern kind of gets us a little bit trapped in, first of all, not seeing the leadership strengths that come from a whole variety of different approaches to looking at problems and people. But also it helps us to stay stuck in expecting that if only I develop these particular traits, then I would be successful. And so I think that one of the benefits of looking at the world through these patterns is to understand, well, what are the innate leadership abilities of an innocent?
Right. Within each
pattern. And we have had examples of leading different types of individuals with all different mix of, profiles that are good leaders, that are strong leaders, that are not afraid to stand in the style that makes them, unique, and to lead from that place. Not to try and change themselves, although obviously growth and transition, like you described, is a beautiful, choice to make a shift for the betterment of yourself, for the betterment of your project, your team. But to understand your innate ability to lead from the human being that you are, I think is a really important topic, and to get clear about what that is, and to be able to express that, to be able to stand in that self-awareness.
Yeah. I'm thinking about two leaders who've been really part of a big culture shift program that's been going on through one of our partners. And they're kind of co-leaders, and one has high every person and one has high ruler. And just even as I say that out loud, you might have like some ideas that an every person shows up very differently than a ruler does in a leadership position. I mean, and that's just one of their patterns. They each have, a combination of patterns too. But, sometimes in that situation, there's a lot of complementary things that can be, what do we count on each of those leaders for? So lots of potential to lead in an authentic way. I also would note, we have partners that have seen lots of scores from other assessment tools, specifically around leadership. And often they'll bring that assessment result into a culture talk conversation, and a leader will be really frustrated. Maybe they'll have had like a 360 assessment of some kind, and they've gotten feedback that says, you're coming on too strong, or you're not doing this, and there's this negative feedback that they're looking at. How do I grow through that? Well, the thing is that when they look at that, when they look at themselves through the pattern of archetypes, they'll go, oh, it gives them a handle on how would I shift into a more, that whatever the behavior is, it exists on a continuum. And there are probably other aspects to that behavior that are serving me, that are showing up in a positive way. And so it's like learning. It's just interesting. I think that they can see how to shift and evolve when they look at it through a story. And they can also realize that I'm never going to be perfect, and I'm always going to tend towards some of these shadows. But now that I know what they are, I can, self-monitor and pull myself again out more quickly. So if you're doing leadership development work, if you are working with teams around culture and looking for a tool set to lead that conversation in a really impactful, profound way. If you're looking to start a business and grow a business where, maybe there's a model that you can just take right in and leverage in terms of growing leaders, we're happy to share the Culture Talk with you. You can reach out to Teresa or I directly to learn more. We'll actually share one of our assessments with you, so you can take your own archetype assessment and find out which of these patterns are.
What kind of a leader are you?
Or if you're a business leader and you want to bring a workshop like this in, you want a leadership experience that is new and has a lot of room for, it's at the beginning of the jetway, has a lot of room to grow within your organization. We're happy to talk to you about creating some kind of experience for your teams.
Yeah. And if you're looking for something that ladders to the culture conversation, this is also a great foundation and a great starting point, a great door to walk through that then naturally lends itself to understanding what kind of culture is happening in this organization, and how do my leaders have the ability to shift and change and impact that. Mm-hmm. So we welcome, as Cynthia said, connection with anyone who wants to join us. And we thank you for joining us today, for being part of this conversation. We have several more really impactful lives that are planned over the next 2 months, May and June. And we really would love to hear your leadership development stories, questions, and any opportunities there are to kind of connect the dots and bring your expertise to this conversation on leadership as well.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thank you.